Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are considering the Ashtanga Yoga Sutra. Ashtanga Yoga Sutra is the Ashtanga practice, Ashtadhan Sadhana, Ashtanga Anushthan, which, as Patanjali mentions, would work for Ashuddhikshaya and Gynana Dipti. And that would work for Viveka Khyati. And that would work for Kaivalyam. So, we should recall that we also came across in the first chapter a practice which was kind of Dwianga sadhana. Dwianga, that means two-limbed. One was Abhyasa, the other one was Vairagya. Abhyasa Vairagya Abhyam Tannirodha. That was means of yoga. Precisely means of saprajnat, asaprajnat, samadhi. So, Samadhi Pada mentioned the means as Abhyasa Vairagya. The commencement of the Sadhana Pada mentioned the means of Kriya Yoga, of three limbs. Precisely, it is not three limbs, as you should recall that we considered it. It is integrated Tapas-Sva Ishvara Pranidhan, not Tapas and Swadhyaya and Ishvara Pranidhan, but a composite of the three as meets. So, we came across these two sutras which mentioned measures and means. And now we come to the third one, which is Ashtanga Yoga, eight-limbed yoga. So it seems that the three different means are mentioned, namely for Uttamadhika's yoga, Madhyamadhika's yoga, Adhamadhika's yoga. But if you see the constitution of these means mentioned, 2 or 3 or now 8, they are all same, because they are all means of yoga. Now here we have now come to Ashtanga Yoga. And the Ashtangas need Anushtanam as expressly mentioned or held in the sutra. Now, it should be understood qualitatively that in these Ashtangas means we must identify, or there must be intrinsic presence of Tapasvita, Swadhyayanishthata, and Ishvara Pradhana Bhav. So, if you have to understand qualitatively, these Ashtanga means eight-limbed yoga, we should know that there must be potentially the Kriya Yoga. Although not actually, but potentially there must be the Kriya Yoga. And also, analysis would tell us that there must be intrinsically Abhyas component and Vairagya component. So point is, when Ashtanga sadhana is being pursued, one has to see qualitatively, screen the practices and identify that there is Abhyasa component and Vairagya component. To ensure that the measures applied are yoga, are for yoga. And also, a test should tell you or tell us that there is also Kriya Yoga potentially there. Tapas-Sva, dhya, Vishwapradhan kind of Kriya Yoga is potentially there. So that will again reassure that the practices are as expected in yoga. So we would be understanding in Ashtanga Yoga that we will be practicing Yamas, which are fivefold, Niyamas, which are fivefold, etc. So there must be an investigation and scrutiny or analysis to see whether the material of yoga is constituting all that we do as practices. Practices of yamas and niyamas and asana and pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, samadhi, etc. So what I am trying to say that if somebody or you yourself put a question to yourself as to why Ahimsa is being practiced, so in that case, the answer should not be that Ahimsa is practiced for the fear that we are not immoral and unethical. Or I am getting my needs satisfied by practicing Ahimsa. So it should not be, the answer should not be that for the sake of morality and ethicality that I practice. That is not the Ashtanga kind of Yama and Niyama or Ahimsa precisely. Because otherwise Ahimsa is practiced for that sake, that you come out as moralist and ethicalist. If you are practicing Satya, so the practice of Satya on worldly plane or our plane, we will be coming across, we can investigate as to why do we practice Satya. So Satya might be practiced because of the fear of the law of the land can be quite offensive to us. That I am afraid of the law getting applied on me, or I am afraid of Chitragupta, and therefore I am practicing Satya. I fear that the karma, that karma might be penalizing me. So that won't be right psychodynamics of why Satya is practiced in yamas. Or I want to get acclaimed recognition in the world that I don't practice untruth, but I practice untruth. So I become trustworthy person in the world or for people around me. In order that people should trust me, I speak truth. I adhere to truth. won't be Ashtanga kind of thing. So, why a moralist or ethicalist would be practicing those things would not be the right mode of practicing Ahimsa or Satya or Asteya, etc. So why a moralist would practice Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Parigraha can be investigated, analyzed, determined. So in Ashtanga Yoga, that should not be the psychodynamics as to why yamas are practiced. That's why it should be understood that yamas are not moral, ethical principles. They are not norms, or they are not given by normative science as to why someone would be practicing those. So also in Shaucha, for instance in Niyamas, why are you taking bath? Oh, it is too hot, uncomfortable, and therefore I am taking bath, or I take bath, I have taken bath. So that also won't be proper. Or I feel I am dirty and I should not get the feeling that I am dirty, nor people should say that I am dirty, I take bath. Because Shaucham means Snanam, if you consider that. And of course, there are many things in Shaucha, Bahya Shaucha, Abhyantar Shaucha. But we are taking just an example, because Snana would be a part of Bahya Shaucha. So why you and me and everyone takes bath every day? And how and why Snanam is part of Anushtanam are two different things. So there can be so many answers. I saw a water body. I felt like taking a dip, and therefore I jumped into the waters. Or it's too hot, and therefore I felt I will feel better by taking a shower. Or I did some physical work and therefore I perspired and I feel that I am not clean and therefore I am taking bath. So such psychodynamics are not proper for one to be taking bath, because it has to be anushtanam. So a yogi will trace that there is something of the nature of anushtanam in ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, something like anushtanam in shaucha, santosha, tapas-Sva, dhya, pranidhanam. Therefore, that would be practice. So why a yogi, Ashtanga sadhaka would be practicing is something that we need to consider here. So that we will have little understanding of this scheme that Patanjali has mentioned. So also one can answer, why are you doing asanas? Because I am not having any body movement, I am not exercising sufficiently. So therefore I want some body exercise and therefore I do asanas. Now this won't be right psychodynamics. I want to activate the body, mobilize the body, use the body, exercise the body. So why somebody does exercise cannot be the same psychodynamics to be doing asanas, looking at it as a form of physical exercising or physical activity. So, because we can question ourselves as to why we are doing asanas, and then we will realize that if we are practicing asanas, whether there is really any yoga in it or not, and more often there will be no yoga behind why do we do asanas. So also, why are you doing pranayama? It is good to do some deep breathing. It is good for me. It is good for my system. So I want to have some deep breathing done, and therefore I do pranayama. This is not why pranayama is done in Ashtanga yoga. So these are all practices without nishtha. If there is a nishtha, it is nishtha without nishtha. And you will identify that in what we do, such as say asanas, pranayam, because this is how the yoga is catered today, that you do it asanas in the form of some asanas and some pranayamas or some kriyas which are in vogue in yoga of our times. You will not identify any tapas, any swadhyaya, any Ishwar Pranidhan in that. So that will tell us that we are not really doing Ashtanga yoga. We might be practicing Yama and Niyamas as moral ethical principles. We might be doing asanas for physical exercise or some remedials or for anatomical physiological health. We might be doing it. So that won't be yoga. And the pranayam, similarly, if we question and genuinely answer as to why we are doing pranayam, you will come across, immediately you will realization that there is no anushtana or there is no ashtanga as expected by Patanjali. It may not be anushtana, but it can be something that is leading towards anushtanam. What I want to say is that you cannot straight away start ashtanga anushtanam, but something that would lead to anushtanam or something that is run up to anushtanam. And so that will tell us, it is not necessarily that we must be looking for anushtan channel and only then do yoga. It is not necessary. Without anushtana channel also, there can be yoga, which is possibly a run-up to yoga, anushtana of yoga. So there are certain questions for which we have to seek answers, and then that will tell us how far we are in authentic or genuine yoga. So these are a few tests, and I suggest that a very raw beginner need not be testing the yoga. The testing of yoga should take place after a while, but and then it will be kind of important guide for us to become aware. Right away, you cannot be practicing anything that is classical yoga and that is something as authentic yoga. So I again tell you here that as a beginner, you need not test your yamas and niyamas, whether they are really having intrinsic yogic value or not, or asana, pranayama, etc., whether they have intrinsic value or not. Because it is a formative period, and yet actually we are yet to approach the run-up of yoga. So these tests are not meant for the raw beginners to test whether ours is genuine yoga or not. So that's also something that should be borne in mind. But somebody practicing years and years and years and decades and decades and decades certainly need to have this the test considered, testing whether one is really in yoga, whether it is remotely yoga or not. So that is why whatever has been said so far has been said. Now, there is one more point needs to be considered. That first chapter we were told yoga is samadhi. That is, yoga is vritti nirodha, chitta vritti nirodha. So this was a formal instruction that we got in the text. Now the question is whether the Yama Niyamas that one might be practicing, whether they are remotely connected to this yoga of the kind of chitta vritti nirodha. Again I say, this is not a test that should come for a raw beginner. But at some stage, after having put a lot of years, many years in yoga, one can have this test in order to just somewhere conceive and construe whether what we do really is yoga or not, or is it remotely yoga or not. At least it should be remotely yoga. Now, the point is that even the Yama Niyamas that are practiced in authentic yoga or run up to authentic yoga, there will be some component of nirodha. There will be some traces of nirodha. So this is what I'm trying to put across. So it could be Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, why it is practiced or for what sake it is practiced or with what it is practiced, due to what it is practiced. There must be Abhyasa potential and a Vairagya potential. So all those practices, be that physical, mental, etc., they must show this aspect that there are means of yoga, means of restraint of yoga, that Abhyasa potential is underlying it or will generate it, is deeply underlying it, if not immediately, but deeply underlying it or will generate it. So that's how the yoga needs to be tested by one who is really practicing it. Otherwise, practice of yoga can have different psychodynamics. As the popular illustration I gave you that why someone is doing asanas, answer given is that I do it for my fitness, I do it as a pathy, I have some malady, I have some problem and I do it as a pathy, or I am doing it for prevention so I can improve my autoimmune system. Because how do you prevent diseases? And that's why we do yoga today. We want to prevent diseases. If we have diseases, we want to counter them, mitigate them, or we want to prevent them. And that is by autoimmune system reinforced. So it will be easily found that we will be doing yoga which is not with right motivation and psychodynamics. So even if there are Yama Niyamas, they must be having relationship with yoga. Either something of yoga is remotely underlying it, at a distance even, huge distance, no problem. Or remotely it would be reaping the potentials of yoga, Abhyasa potentials and Vairagya potentials. So Nirodha must be traceable. at least microscopically traceable, that it is yoga. Now, if yoga is nirodha, logically all yogangas must be also nirodha, having nirodha. Otherwise, they won't be yogangas. Do you understand? If yoga is samadhi and samadhi is nirodha of chitta, each limb and sub-limb of yoga must have that potential. Any and every step taken as yoga must be a step taken towards this nirodha or yoga. That might be a long way ahead. Like there are certain pilgrimage centers which are on the hilltop, and sometimes you have to climb up something like 10,000 steps or 25,000 steps. But you know that if you are climbing up the steps, there is a chance that you will reach that shrine which is atop 10,000 steps or 25,000 steps. So it should be ensured that the step taken in yoga is step towards yoga. A step taken in our yoga is step towards that yoga. That is important. So every limb or sub-limb, because in yamas and niyamas we have sub-limbs. Like yamas have 5, niyamas are 5. So each of those, when we are taking up, there must be certainly a step taken towards nirodha dharma, nirodha chitta. So, the angas here should be understood, otherwise we don't have this word, we say limbs. Angas are rendered as limbs. But we know that in our body, some of the limbs can be amputated and yet we are existing. So that should not be the case here, that one of the limb has no yoga or one of the sub-limb has no yoga. This should not be the case. Every limb and sub-limb should have yoga potentially. You can't say if some of the limbs have yoga and some of the limbs don't have yoga. Then they are not limbs. If there is no yoga in those limbs, then there is no yoga. All the limbs must have yoga. So that is how the word anga, angi should be understood in the light of what philosophy puts across. And not just understand that as a limb of yoga. Because as I said, we can be still existing without particular limb. For some reason the limb has been lost, yet we are there. So that's how the anga aspect in the sutra has to be understood. Yoga Ganushthanat, we have seen Ashuddhikshaya and Jnana Dipti. So Yoganga, Anga, that word which has come in the sutra, that should be understood this way. Anyway, Vyasa has very short commentary on it. Because even the names of Ashtangas are not mentioned in the sutra. So he says, Yogangas are 8 and they will be mentioned. They will be described. And therefore he doesn't add any commentary there to explain which are the even limbs, because Patanjali is going to mention the 8 limbs or 8 aspects of yoga in the sutra that is going to follow. So Vyasa doesn't mention that. He briefly mentions as to the Ashuddhikshaya. Tesham anushthanat panchaparvano viparyasya ashuddhi rupasya kshayo nashaha. So, panchaparvano viparyaya, that is avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Technically, that's the meaning of panchaparva viparyaya. So, those are neutralized or mitigated, and that is the Ashuddhikshaya aspect. Now, as I said, in the light of why we do yoga, we don't really do for klesha attenuation. We do our yoga for us to feel fine, feel fresh, be healthy, feel healthy and be healthy. That's why we do our yoga. We are not really trying to remove all those the ashuddhis which are mentioned, implied in the sutra. So these ashuddhis are kleshas, klesha vrittis. So the tests that I have been mentioning are for not us to really test whether we are doing right or not, but to see when does it commence for us. When does this yoga commence? When does it commence for us? So that is another reason why I mentioned about the test little while ago. It's not that we must be testing it, but that will tell us whether we are more on the track of authentic yoga. So, the klesha kshaya or ashuddhikshaya at least should be of the nature of papa kshaya. So, that is what Vyasa is mentioning, that there is at least papa kshaya, papa kshalanam. And we are not inclined to be committing vices. And our vices are also effaced, obliterated by the Ashtanga Yoga. So, the religious practitioner of yoga would be bothered about the papa, the vice, and that is really dreading for authentic yogi. And if that is not really bothering us, that means still we are not in the direction of yoga. So that is why the Ashtanga Yoga is called ethico-religious practices, to put it in English. Again, that may not be apt word because today the word religion is very much tainted. So there are reservations to use the word here. But in the light of fact that the word religion was not really a problem. Today it has become a problem. But when it was not a problem, and this was a time, maybe 100, 200, 300, 500 years back, that religion was not really a problem. It has become a problem these days. So therefore, we are today little inhibitive, reluctant to embrace any religion. But this is in Sanskrit called Achar Dharmaniti Pranali. Achar Dharma, because the concept of dharma is totally different. If you are students of Patanjali's philosophy, the dharma would be differently construed, not as ism. Anyway, so that's why these are not moral ethical principles. These are not achara niti pranali aspects, but dharma niti pranali aspects. So at least the Oriental mind should identify the difference between achara niti dharma, or achara niti pranali precisely, and dharma niti pranali. And in achara dharma niti, there is foundation for Gynana. Because morality, ethicality doesn't make someone Jnani. One can be a knowledgeable person but no morality, ethicality, or very poor morality, ethicality. But when it is Jnanam that we have been referring often, as is described in Bhagavad Gita, defined in Bhagavad Gita, that Adhyatma Jnanam is only Jnanam, rest everything is actually Ajnanam. So the Jnanam would need the purified condition of the mind, psyche, consciousness. That is why they say that the spiritual wisdom dawns in pure mind. Impure mind would not give rise to spiritual wisdom. Tainted mind, dented mind, refracted mind, sullied mind would not give rise to Jnanam. But the pure mind would give rise to Jnanam. So Jnanam needs basically a pure mind. And this purification itself, as we discussed yesterday in the last session, that itself, Ashuddhikshaya itself, is the basis for Jnana to appear, to bloom and blossom. So we had seen the relationship between Ashuddhikshaya and Jnana Dipti, a relationship between purity of mind, psyche, consciousness and knowledge. Jnanam appearing, what is called as spiritual wisdom and spiritual knowledge. So it should be understood that Papakshaya has relationship with Jnanodaya. If the Papa is stuffed in our mind, psyche, consciousness, there is no chance for Jnana to appear. So Papakshaya and Jnanodaya, the mitigation or annihilation of Papa, the sinning. Again, the sinning English word has a particular connotation, and I'm taking a risk in using English word. So the students of yoga should be aware of Papa Punya. And in course of our discussion earlier in the same chapter, we had considered Papa Punya concepts. So I want you to go back and crystallize what is Papa and what is Punya. And not just vice and virtue. Take it as vice and virtue. Not loosely render it as vice and virtue. So there's the relationship between Papakshaya and Jnanodaya. As the mind becomes purified, by and by, the Jnana would appear. And that is why the Adhyatma often says that Jnana appears in pure mind. I recall a quotation offhand which comes in Garuda Puranam 1.229. Verses 6 and 7. Jnanam utpadyate pumsam kshayat papasya karmanaha. When the papa karma is neutralized, annihilated, destroyed, then Jnanam utpadyate. Jnanotpatti will take place, which corresponds to not how intelligent you are, but how pure you are in your mind. So Jnanam comes to pure mind. So Jnanam utpadyate pumsam kshayat papasya karmanaha yatha adarshatale prakhye pashyanti atmanam atmani. So, just as crystal clear water shows its basin, or as the verse of Garuda Purana says, a clear mirror, clean mirror, clear mirror, it gives your reflection properly. If the mirror is contorted, you don't get your reflection properly. If the mirror is contorted, you don't get your reflection properly. Therefore, yatha adarshatale prakhye pashyanti atmanam atmani. So spiritual wisdom is to know oneself within oneself and know oneself by oneself. That is what called Atma knowing Atma. Who knows Atma? Your intelligence doesn't know Atma. Who will know Atma? Even Manas doesn't know Atma. Atma will know Atma. So just as in a water body, when the water is very pure and clean and clear, it shows the basin of the water body, bottom of the water body. And moreover, when the lake is also steady, such lake is steady, it will show the bottom. So the mind needs to be clean to be really having Atma realization, because Atma is realized within, Atma is within. If Atma is realized, it is realized within, for which the lake of consciousness should be like crystal clear water in a water body. It cannot have dirt. If the water is sullified and water is dirty, you cannot be seeing the bottom of the water body. The water becomes opaque and it will never show you the bottom of it, the base of it, the basin of it. So the Atma Jnanam is Jnanam about oneself, which is Jnana within, Jnana about something within. And for that, the lake of consciousness should be like pure water in a water body, where you have transparent water, that you get reflection in the water of surrounding, and you also are able to sight the very floor of the water body. And that's why the pure mind is needed. So point is, we are trying to reiterate that Ashuddhikshaya is not Ashuddhikshaya. Ashuddhikshaya is the means for Jnanodaya. And for that purpose, we took an illustration from the quotation that I cited, which is from Garuda Puranam. So in Bhashya, you come across the word Nashaha. So Nashaha need not be taken as absolute and complete annihilation. It is also Tanuta, attenuation, attenuating the Ashuddhi, weakening the Ashuddhi, rarifying the Ashuddhi is also to be understood in the word Nashaha that comes in Bhashya. And of course, the next statement in Vyasa's comment makes that clear. Tat kshaye samyak jnanasya abhivyaktihi. Tat kshaye. Ashuddhi nasha is of course quite express. But then that will take place in a process, graduated way. So there will be kshaya. Kshaya means enfeeblement, weakening the impurities in the mind, psyche. So tat kshaye samyak jnanasya abhivyaktihi. The samyak jnana, essential jnana, true jnana would only come as and as there is kshaya. It's not that you have to wait for complete annihilation of the dirt and then only knowledge will come. As and as the dirt of the psychic consciousness is set aside, so and so there will be Jnanotpatti. So there is correspondence between Ashuddhi weakened, Ashuddhi set aside, and Jnanam appearing. So there is that correspondence between Ashuddhikshaya and Jnana Dipti or Jnana Prapti. So there is corresponding Tirobhav and Avirbhav. The Papa aspects fade out and Jnana aspect fade in. So there is correspondence. So it should not be Kakataliya Nyaya, the maxim that the crow sat on a bark and that bark fell down. It is incidental that the crow happened to sit on it and the result was that that bark or branch fell down. So it is not Kakataliya Nyaya, but it is the relationship that they have that way. For a branch to fall down, we don't expect birds to sit on it. However, sometimes you will come across this that the birds have got onto the branch and the branch has fallen. The branch has fallen for different reasons. The bird sitting on it, the crow sitting on it was incidental thing. So it is not incidental cause, it is material cause. This is what we have to understand here. So Bhashyakar makes it clear. Yatha yatha cha kshiyate ashuddhihi tatha tatha kshaya kramanurodhini jnanasya api diptihi vivardhate. So he clearly mentions the correspondence as and as the Ashuddhikshaya goes away, so and so the Jnana Dipti would be blooming and blossoming and coming forth. Kramanurodhi. So there is correspondence. So knowledge downs with regards to attenuation of impurities of the mind. So as I had said in the last session that there are not two things that one has to work, that do something for Ashuddhikshaya and do something else for Jnanodaya. Ashuddhikshaya itself does. The Jnanodaya would be result of Ashuddhikshaya. Now how far this Jnanodaya would take place, this is also clearly mentioned by Vyasa in his commentary. Sa khalu esha vivruddhihi prakarsha anubhavatya viveka khyate aguna purusha swarupa vijnana iti arthaha. So if the knowledge is going to dawn, how much knowledge is going to dawn? How far the knowledge is going to dawn? The knowledge will be rising up. The dawn of knowledge will take place until it reaches its acme point. And that is Aguna Purusha Swarupa Vijnanam. What is ultimate knowledge or finality of knowledge? Aguna Purusha Swarupa Vijnanam. Right from Gunas to Purusha, their Swarupa Vijnanam, knowledge about their Swarupam, their intrinsic nature, and that is Viveka Khyati. So, that is acme position, acme condition, zenith condition, final condition or finality of Jnana Prapti. So Ashtanga Yoga is going to give you the finality of Jnanam, which is the Aguna Purusha Vivekam. Guna Purusha Vivekam. Sattva Purusha Anyata Khyati, Viveka Khyati. So, at last we have entered the sutra and the commentary after long enunciation, a prologue given to Ashtanga Yoga. So now we will be proceeding to the textual aspects and some nuances and implications of the textual mention. So that we will continue from next time. So enough for the time being. Namaskar all of you.